Good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to be with you today. My talk today is going to focus on three artists who were part of the Parrish Art Museum temporary exhibit, Unfinished Business, several years ago. The three artists are Ross Bleckner, Fischl, and David Salle. They were all students at California Institute of Arts at the same time during the 1970s. California Institute of Art is a relatively new school which was started by Walt Disney in 1961 and who envisioned it specifically for visual and performing arts. This photo is the cover of the catalog for Unfinished Business, and it's a picture of a street in Soho where all the artists reconnected after Cal Arts in the later 1970s. Two other artists who have had interactions with these three artists are Joe Fig, an artist and author, and April Gornik, the life partner of Fischl. They also will be included within this talk. Next slide. From left to right, this is 1970s photos of Fischl, Ross Bleckner, and David Salle. Fischl and Blechner were both are born in New York and spent most of their childhood in suburban Nassau County. Fischl did move to Arizona in his teens, but he went to Cal Arts as the school for his bachelor's degree in art. After receiving his degree, he became a guard at a museum, an art museum. I've often fool around with the guards at the Parrish and tell them that they too may become the next Fischl with all the information they gleaned from the artwork at our museum. After his graduation from Cal Arts and working at a museum, he became an instructor at the Nova Scotia School of Art and Design. While he was there, many of the instructors were influenced by contemporary German artists, and he did go to Germany to visit with these artists. And at one point, both he and Ross Bleckner and David Salle had galleries both in New York City as well as Cologne, Germany. Fischl returned to New York in 1978 after being in Nova Scotia School. Ross Bleckner, on the other hand, stayed in New York and went to NYU undergraduate school. He first was majoring in business, but then shifted to his love art, and that was in the School of Education. He received a master's degree in fine arts from Cal Arts, and soon after his return to New York City, he had his first solo art show in 1975. Quite a lot of recognition for a 25-year-old in New York City. David Salle was raised in Kansas. He received both his bachelor's and master's from Cal Arts. He relocated to New York City in 1975, and one of the first people he contacted in New York City was Blechner. He said that Blechner was like the godfather. He had a studio, he had connections, and he was the person to know if you were a young artist starting out in New York. Presently, all three of these artists have homes here on the East End of Long Island and have had an association with the Parrish Art Museum. Next slide, please. Inside the painter's studio is a very intriguing book by Joe Fig, who is also not only the author of the book, but also an artist. And what he decided to do was put together a comprehensive list of questions and then invite contemporary artists to invite him into their studio and answer his questions. And then based on this information, he created 3D multimedia mixed media dioramas of this. One of them is part of the Parrish art collection, and one of the, when I was researching the artists for this presentation, when I reread the interviews for Ross Bleckner, Eric Fischl, and April Gornik that Fig did, it gave me such insight into how the artist creates a routine or not a routine in their studio, and how this might impact their art. The questions themselves are very intriguing. They range from how do you create labels or titles for your paintings, and what advice would you give to young artists starting out? Next. This is of photos that Fig took of Ross Bleckner's studio in Sagaponack. We have images of the studio that he built after he bought Truman Capote's Sagaponack Beach home in 1993. The photo on the right is, again, a photo that Fig took of Ross Bleckner within his studio. And if you look around the studio, you see it's very neat and very organized. Well, some of the salient points of Blechner's responses to Fig's questions are that he works on a series of paintings at the same time. For instance, you can see two of the paintings that he's working on right now. At the time that this picture was taken, they were part of a push-pull series of how things work in space. A very interesting way of interpreting his somewhat abstract paintings. When he's painting, he works on a series of paintings from 8 to 5, 7 days a week for 3 to 4 months, and then takes a 1 to 2 month break from painting. He stated that he can be a workaholic and is consistent with his routines. He starts each day with sweeping the studio floor. Now, looking at the floor in the photo, there isn't really too much to pick up. I think that's because Blechner states that he cleans his studio a couple of times each day while he's busy painting. His studio is well organized and very neat. He focuses his attention on purpose and results. Next, please. This painting, The Forest, in 1981, is, again, the title gives away some of his identity-oriented imagery. Fischl has said about Blechner that he is a painter's painter, and I feel that that has to do with his handling of paint on a canvas. If you look at this, this painting, again, of the forest, and if you imagine that each one of the lines perhaps might stand for one of the trees in the forest, it reminds me of the idiom, you can't see the forest for the trees, and that can apply to so much in life when we're so attentive to details that we don't manage to get the whole picture. Next, please. It may be hard to see, but the number in the center of this painting, 27,764, has a very significant meaning for Ross Bleckner, the artist. It's the number of people who died from AIDS by 1987. It is one of the many paintings that Blechner created during the AIDS epidemic. Blechner does not view himself as a political artist, but he does want his art to be relevant. One of his favorite dictums is, I can't, I must, I will. Next, please. In this photo, we see Ross Bleckner working with a group of young people in Uganda. He was awarded the title of Goodwill Ambassador by the United Nations in 2009, the first artist to get that award. After working with the students, he had an exhibition of the paintings. There were many exhibitions of these paintings, and funds were raised for the United Nations through the efforts of the students under the tutelage of Ross Bleckner, a very active member of our community, the New York community, and we can also say the world's community. Next, please. Next, yes, okay. Mysticism for Beginners, 2001. This is presently on view at the Parrish Art Museum. It's a very large canvas, and it's one of the series of cell paintings that Blechner started in the 1990s. He starts with an underlayer of one color and then proceeds to place clusters of very oily, pigmented paint on the canvas. Then, by using an airbrush, he moves these created bubbles around and then setting the images for his actual composition. It very much has the feel of organic chemistry, the constant growth and mutation of the human cells. He says, I do see myself as a scientist in a lab on the verge of discovery. He tries to find solutions to dilemmas, but through his paintings. If we look at this painting, many of us who have had experience with different diseases of the body know that the shape of cells are very relevant in the diagnosis of different illnesses. I had wanted to transfer a picture of the cells for COVID-19 within this, but I feel that I like the beauty of Blechner's cells much better. I'll take this one rather than the COVID-19 ones. But again, Ross Bleckner is a thinking man's artist. Even though his paintings are abstract, they make you think. His title, Mysticism, brings to mind the hope we all have right now that COVID-19 might soon be over. And again, all illness. Right now, there's, at our golf course, there's the race for a cure going on, and many of the people within the golf course are donating funds for cancer research. Blechner really believes that in advice given from Brancusi to young artists, that all you need to do is show up, put a broom in your hands when you first get to your studio, and just by the act of sweeping and cleaning, you will start working. So he feels that persistence and routine is very important for young artists starting out. Next, please. This is Joe Figg's diorama that I spoke about earlier in the presentation. It shows the double studio that was built on their property, April and Eric's property in North Haven. He interviewed both April and Eric, April Gornik and Eric Fischl for his book, within the artist studio. The artists Eric Fischl and April Gornik moved from Nova Scotia to New York City in 1978. They started to come out to the East End of Long Island in the late 1980s. In 2000, they built a home and studios in Sag Harbor. This couple is very involved in two special Sag Harbor community projects. One is the restoration after a fire of the Sag Harbor movie theater. The reopening of the theater was supposed to be a couple of months ago, but you can guess it was not happening because of our present stay-at-home orders. The Sag Harbor movie theater will have the iconic neon sign that was present from the 1940s that also has been restored and will be placed on the theater. The other project that they're in the process of doing is they are the husband and wife team who have purchased an 1800s Methodist church that has been deconsecrated and are remodeling it to become a secular place for artists in residence to live and present their work to the public. Very similar in some ways to the Watermill project, and similar also to one of the goals of the Parrish Art Museum, which is to bring artists, not only famous artists, but artists who might just be starting out and making a presentation at the Parrish Art Museum. Next, please. This is a photo of Eric Fischl in his studio. During his interview with Fig, Fischl stated that he didn't have any consistency to his work routine. He usually works on one painting at a time and only cleans the paint table when the layered paint is holding him back and he wants to start fresh. He waxed poetic about the huge easel that you see on the left in this photo that he has within his North Haven studio. It holds a large canvas and moves around. It tilts so paint doesn't drip onto a finished area of the painting. In the early 80s, both Fischl and Salle were associated with both the Mary Boone Gallery in New York City and Michael Werner in Cologne. While they were at Cal Arts, they also shared the same studio and befriended Blechner at the same time. Both Fischl and Salle's paintings tell a story, but each other's style is very different. Blechner has said about, commenting about Fischl, is that his use of the glassine tissue thin paper layered technique will show on the one hand Fischl being very strong and self-protective, but on the other hand sensitive, empathetic, and above all consistently loyal. Next, please. Fischl's Scardale painting is somewhat voyeuristic. Here we see a bride smoking a cigarette with a cat and a dog as her only companions. A somewhat dysfunctional scene at what should be a happy moment on a wedding day. This painting is 3 separate canvases, one for the bride, one for the dog, and one for the cat. It almost gives you a feeling of loneliness looking at this painting. Again, it's telling a story in a very representational way, but by painting gestures as well as marks, it has a very feeling of sadness. Next, please. The Parrish Art Museum recently asked artists to create a short video stating what they may be working on during the pandemic. In Fischl's video, he welcomed us into his studio and talked a little about this painting. The title is Like Explaining the End of the World to a Dog. When Fig asked him, how do you come up with the titles of your paintings? He told him, sometimes it just comes to you. Well, perhaps this painting pretty much sums up what many of us are now experiencing. It's like explaining the end of the world, not only to a dog, but to each other. By the way, this painting is on view at the Scardale Gallery in East Hampton at the present time. Next, please. Here is April Gornik here in her North Haven studio. She told Fig that she tends to be compulsive. She works on a series of paintings and charcoals at the same time with most of her paintings have to do with landscapes. During the short video she created for the online pandemic series, she gave us a tour of her studio with its recycling area, which you can see here with the Amazon box, and cat playground, which you can't see right here, but it's right behind her, and a sewing area. Right now in her sewing area, she's busy making masks for friends and community members. Hard to work, and she's finding it very hard to do artwork during this very stressful time. She also stepped outside of her studio, which has a close-by pond and a vegetable garden that she tends. She's finding comfort in many of the bucolic surroundings around her home in North Haven. You can sense her love of nature, that even within the present situation, she is reflecting on nature and is getting some strength from it. Next, please. This 1983 painting by Gornik, Light Before Heat, really is a combination of many different photos that she has taken of a different landscape. Then what she does is she uses Photoshop to create a collage, adding and subtracting elements, and creates a preliminary sketch for her work. Gornik's work is figurative in that the images are very recognizable. She starts with a choice of color for the underpainting and then builds up the surface of the painting with a special emphasis on light, space, and defining marks. Perhaps for this particular painting, she's using a blue as the underpainting with dark marks to define the horizon line. Gornik works on a scale in relationship to the actual size of the human body. She wants the viewer who might be standing in front of this painting to become part of the painting. Next, please. This 2018 more recent Gornik painting of sunset also shows tension and release in her paintings. It seems to be very evident in this landscape that the push and pull of the ocean sky separated by the setting sun is very much a response, can be very much a response to this painting. This is a very large painting, again, that would envelop the viewer upon looking at it. Next, please. Salle's book, David Salle's book, How to See, is a compilation of essays that he wrote about contemporary artists. He states that when he first came to New York City in the late 1970s, he wrote reviews to help pay for his $120 rent. By each review got him $30, so all he would need is 4 reviews a month in order to cover his rent. He includes within this book an essay that is very telling, in that one of his very strong compass points is called California arts instructors John Baldessari and Vito Acconci. Many of the essays are about contemporaries and friends, including Alex Katz, Jeff Koons, and Roy Lichtenstein. Salle also, during his career, collaborated with Carol Armitage, who created many ballets. He did the set designs for at least 12 of these ballets. Part 4 of his book can almost be summed up as required reading for anyone thinking about becoming an artist. I especially like the Salle Commencement 2011 commencement address. He said in that address that art should not be a popularity contest, that people want, that most people want a kind of art that is accessible and communicative. That seems to be the more popular. Is there a difference between art and entertainment? He goes on to talk about Eric Fischl's memoir, Bad Boy, and how it is an account of one artist's struggle to become and to have an authentic voice as a painter. Artists don't need to believe in the wisdom of crowds. Salle feels that it is good practice when looking at any work of art to try to be aware of what you find yourself thinking about. Let's see if we can apply this when looking at the next slide. Next, please. This is a David Salle painting from 1982. The title is Poverty is No Disgrace. Let's see if the images can give us anything that relates to poverty is no disgrace. Here is a collection of images, a variety of styles and subjects. The nude is based on a photograph. The 1950s red chair is an actual chair attached to a free sketch of what seems to be a concentration camp gathering of people with an image, an outlined image of could be either a woman or man's face. And on the far left, it are amoeba-like shapes that could have, if you want, some semblance to human bodies. Now, poverty is no disgrace. You really would have to stretch to have that fit all three of these panels. It seems to me that it's a stream of conscious, dreamlike sequence, which is open to many interpretations. Many viewers of Salle's work feel unsettled and finds his work not to be accessible. Next, please. However, fast forward to 2004. A little background first about Carlo Bellotti, who was an Italian-American passionate collector of art. He was a businessman who had homes in Palm Beach, New York, and Rome. He was a friend and supporter of many artists such as Disgrace, Warhol, Lichtenstein, Dali, and Rivers. He made multiple commissions to artists. Bellotti established a museum in the Villa Borghese Gardens in Rome, and it houses his personal art collection. However, for the opening of the museum, he had a temporary exhibit where he commissioned 3 artists to create works of art based on Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. Salle chose 3 themes from the chapel for 3 large, massive paintings. This is one of them. This is creation. If you look here, again, you could see an underpainting of Michelangelo that's done in acrylic, which is more fresco-like than the front front images in this painting that are done in oil. And there's a whole group of disparate images that have to deal somewhat with creation on the left side of this massive painting. You can see the idea of freedom and flight. You can see the light when you're born. There's a light that goes on, the light in the family, all kinds of things that you can say that have to do with creation. But on the right side is a vortex. Now, this vortex style image is very frequent within Salle's paintings, later paintings. Again, the vortex is done again in a style that Salle has become very familiar with in his paintings. Next, please. This is the second of the large canvases. It is The Last Judgment. Each painting consists of the two sections. On the left is larger and has the fresco-like Michelangelo in the background. And in the front, you have the more recent images, the atomic bomb, the drink can be cause of a judgment, the last judgment, the idea of a Warhol-like film strip, the bomb cloud, the scale of justice, and in the lower right-hand corner of the large canvas, there's a self-portrait of Salle right there. The right rectangular canvas is the vortex that is, again, in many of Salle's works. Next, please. This one, The Flood, again, background fresco-like in acrylic of Noah's Ark, the Michelangelo Noah's Ark. The front oil painting of the elephant, very lifelike. So it's not the one that was going into Noah's Ark, but rather maybe of the Indian Ocean tsunami. And the Warhol-like film strip is of Hurricane Katrina. The lighthouse is the Marston Hartley's lighthouse, a copy of it that he did, and a light, a glass of water, everything to do with water, Hosaki's iconic wave. This beautiful painting is presently on view at the Parrish. This is the end of my presentation. I'm hoping that we'll all see you soon at the Parrish website.